My loving girlfriend cooked me an amazing homemade meal after I told her I had a very rough day at work. I proposed to her the next day. My girlfriend is honestly the most amazing person in my entire life. I came up in a rough household and always dreamed of a perfect home, and I have found that in her. I love her more than words can describe. She is the most beautiful person I have ever met, hands down. That is inside and out. Her smile lights up any room she's in, her eyes are bright and blue and her cheeks go very rosy whenever I compliment her as she blushes. Each night, she has a ritual. I was born on the 12th and she was born on the 23rd, and so she added the two numbers and gives me 35 kisses each night before we go to sleep. One thing about my girlfriend is she is an amazing cook, and when she makes me food it blows my mind. It is Michelin star quality in my opinion. I may be biased though. So last week I had an awful day at work. One of those days where your boss is on your butt about every little thing, you feel like you haven't got a lot of sleep, and where things go wrong. When I was leaving work my sleeve got caught on a handle and it just topped it off. I went home angry, intending not to do anything but cuddle her for comfort. Instead, when I came home I was greeted with an amazing dinner. You see, earlier in the day I told my girlfriend I was having a terrible day, and she used her day off to make a romantic dinner with candles and an amazing mood. She was actually dressed for this in my favorite dress of hers, and the food looked almost as amazing as her, which is a very very high achievement. There was a fantastic homemade carbonara, which is my favorite food in the world. The pasta was handmade by her from scratch. There was freshly baked brown bread which she made herself, garlic bread made from scratch, a glass of my favorite wine for each of us, and 2 ice cream sundaes which she had prepared for us for dessert. She told me she had made this dinner knowing I was stressed at work, and really hoped she managed to turn my bad day into a good one. Not going to lie, I cried when I saw it. The dinner was amazing, and we ended our night by watching A Christmas Carol, which is my favorite Christmas movie. She fell asleep while cuddling against me, and then I knew I had to marry her. The next day, I went out and bought an engagement ring. I knew the one she wanted. We had talked about marriage previously, and my girlfriend cried when I proposed the next day. I'm so happy. My golden child sister broke my new phone that I bought for myself because I didn't buy her one too, so I sold her MacBook and kept the money. My sister is the golden child of our family, and it has been this way since she was born. My parents always wanted a girl, and rejoiced after finding out that my youngest sibling was going to be one. I on the other hand was a boy who came first, and was a failed termination. My parents both have always preferred my little sister. Although they have never said this outright, their actions make it very, very clear. I am currently 16 and my sister is 14, and my parents have already bought her a car and my dad is teaching her how to drive. As early as I can remember, my sister's achievements and special occasions were always more celebrated. She got presents on my birthday, she got to choose the cake on my birthdays, she got to pick all the family events we did. If we ever went to the movies as a family, like we did one year for my birthday, my sister got to pick the movie. I remember that day very well. Avengers Endgame had just come out, and it was all the rave at the time. I was 12 at the time, and desperately wanted to see it. However, my sister objected and wanted to go watch the Lego movie. After some back and forth, which was really just my parents telling me to be the bigger person and let her have her way, we ended up going and watching the Lego movie. One thing that hurt a lot was how much my sister relished in the favoritism of my parents, and used whatever chance she could to wrong me and let me know that our parents would always have her side. Things like her snitching on me for things I didn't do only for me to get in trouble were common. I gave up hope that they would change 2 years ago, when my parents went to a museum with my sister instead of attending my middle school graduation. That night really did break my heart, but I suppose in a sense it was necessary too. It was the day I stopped expecting anything from my parents and started working for everything myself. Stuff like this has been happening all my life, and it is a big reason as to why I'm not close with my family at all. Nowadays, I would describe my sister and my parents as my roommates. A main issue that I currently have is my sister's behavior. The years of getting spoiled and treated like a princess by my parents have led to her becoming unbelievably entitled. She expects her birthdays to be very lavish, she expects to always have the newest technologies and clothing. She owns a Gucci bags. Well, the one thing which she doesn't have is the newest iPhone. That is something I have, or rather had I should say. You see, I've been working a part-time job for the last year and a half and have been saving as much as I can. Up until 2 weeks ago, I still had an iPhone 6, which was my first ever phone my parents bought me at 14. I had saved up way more than enough money to buy the latest iPhone, and that's exactly what I did. I remember coming home from the shop, new phone box in hand, very excited for my new purchase. I managed to use it for about a day uninterrupted, when I heard my sister complaining about me having it. Why do you get to have a new phone when I'm stuck with this old piece of crap? She asked me. The old piece of crap she was referring to was her iPhone 13. I told her because I worked for it, and I saved up for it, and I decided to buy it for myself. My sister proceeded to ask me why I didn't get her one. I was sort of expecting this from her, so I responded by telling her that her current phone is still new, she did not work for a new one, and shouldn't expect me to get her one. She was of course not satisfied, and in a classic move from my sister, went upstairs to tell our mother about it. I knew what was about to happen, and I mentally prepared myself for the argument that was about to ensue. My mother came down a minute later asking me why didn't I buy my sister a new phone, and I proceeded to tell her the same thing I told my sister. She was not happy, and told me that family buys things for each other. I then asked her if that's the case why did she get my sister a car at 13 and despite me being 16 I still haven't received one, and she said it's because my sister doesn't have a job. I called bullcrap then and there and told my mother I am sick of the blatant favoritism that occurs in this house every single day. That I'm tired of my sister being treated like royalty while I'm treated like a peasant, and if they actually expect me to spend my hard-earned money on a new phone for my sister, they must be insane. My sister and my mother ganged up on me, demanding I buy her a new phone, and the argument ended with me heading out of the house to go for a walk. I came back a few hours later, only to be greeted with another argument, this time from my dad about how I should get my sister a new phone. I did not engage in it, however, and went upstairs to sleep. For the next week, I was constantly berated into buying my sister a new phone, and each time I refused, my sister especially, got more and more angry. She even screamed at me once, a literal scream, that I better buy her the new phone. She even threatened to break my phone or throw it at a wall unless I bought her a new one, but these threats of her I took as empty as I figured there was no way she would actually go through with it. Well, 6 days ago or so I woke up to my phone not at my bedside, as well as a smashing noise downstairs. I knew it was only my sister and I in the house, both of my parents had worked despite it being the weekend. I went down to see what the noise was about and there I saw my sister. My phone was on the table, getting repeatedly hit with a hammer. By the time I saw it, it was already totally destroyed beyond repair, and when my sister saw me she laughed and said, "Oops, that was an accident. Maybe you should have bought me a phone after all." I looked at her in pure disappointment, and told her I no longer see her as my sister, and proceeded to pick up what was left of my phone and go upstairs with it. I tried my best to turn it on but it was in vain. She had totally destroyed it. Later that day I told my parents what happened but they didn't believe me, as my sister told them that I just dropped my phone. As if dropping my phone results in it completely shattering. Either way, my parents refused to do anything about it, and because there was no cameras in the house and no proof my sister destroyed it, I could not go to the police about it. It was around that time that I had enough. The same night while she slept, I took her brand new MacBook and listed it for sale, undercutting store prices by a decent amount. The MacBook was barely touched, she doesn't use it often and therefore it was in great condition. The next day I managed to get someone interested in the MacBook and I sold it. I did it all without any of my family members noticing. I managed to sell the MacBook for very close to the amount I paid for my phone. I also researched phone repairs, and it was somehow possible to repair my phone. It would cost a lot, but less than a new phone, and less than the amount of money that I got for my sister's MacBook. I'm going to go down to the repair shop in a few days. What's glorious about this whole situation is that my sister has yet to notice that her MacBook is missing. That's how entitled she is, she doesn't even notice that her latest MacBook has gone missing because she doesn't even use it. My family and I are not speaking currently, and I'm more than happy about that. My entitled wife disappeared after a girl's trip. Years later she showed up at my doorstep with a baby, so I destroyed her life. I used to be happily married to my wife for over 4 years. 4 freaking years, and she left it all behind anyway. We never had any problems in our relationship. But right after we got married, we found out that I can't have kids. My S count was extremely low. That was a very big shock because we had both agreed that we wanted at least 2 kids of our own. It even had me go into depression, from which I luckily recovered thanks to therapy. Over the 4 years, I tried to get her to agree to other options, one of which was adopting. But she denied everything, insisting that she was fine even without kids. That was surprising and unbelievable, because before marriage, she would always tell me how much she wanted kids. She would literally sit for hours and look at stuff she wanted to buy for her future child. But after that day at the doctor's appointment, she became completely numb to anything baby-related. She would often make offhanded comments about me, insulting my weight and lack of fitness. But when I confronted her, she would deny everything and claim that everything was normal. Her change bothered me at the start because I thought she was forcing herself to accept reality, but as time went on I forgot about it and moved on. Then came the big moment, her planned trip. We lived in Brighton, which is in Europe, and she wanted to go to America for a trip with her friends. This wasn't the first girl's trip she had gone on, so I was very supportive of her. I even helped her pack and bought her new clothes to wear on the trip. Little did I know, she had a crazy plan cooking inside her head. After dropping her at the airport, I went home and stayed up so I could call her and make sure she was safe when she landed. After 9 hours of drinking coffee to stay awake, I checked that her flight had landed and called her to make sure. The ringtone rang, but she didn't pick up. I tried a few more times, and even texted her about it, but still, there was no reply. Thinking she was tired and had gone to sleep at the hotel, I also tucked myself into the bed. But since I was still extremely worried about her well-being, I kept waking up and checking my phone for updates. In the morning, I noticed that she still hadn't called back or replied to my texts. After trying for a few more minutes, I called her sister to ask if she had talked to my wife. She hadn't, so I decided to call my wife's friends who were supposed to be on the trip with her. That might sound very invasive, but I genuinely thought it was an emergency. For the longest time, I have had a fear of my plane crashing into the water, and I didn't want my wife to go through that horrible fate. But when I called her friends, guess where they were at? They were 2 blocks away, having morning tea at a cafe. I thought it was a silly prank and I was being messed with. But no. My wife had truly disappeared, and abandoned me. I was distraught and completely went off the rail. I got really drunk and showed up at her parents' house, claiming that they were hiding them. My mother-in-law was really kind and understanding of my situation, however. She let me in her home and comforted me for days. I can't remember how many times I cried on her shoulder. Eventually, I accepted reality and began working on moving on. It took me a long time. Even with the support of my family and friends, I still missed my wife a lot. I kept thinking that she hadn't abandoned me, and maybe she had suffered a terrible fate and was waiting for me to rescue her. I had to go to therapy for 2 long years before I stopped having nightmares about her being lost in a forest. But I didn't give up and did in fact move on. I was going on golf trips with my friends again. Going to pubs with them and getting absolutely smashed. joining the gym and finally working on my fitness level. I even got a promotion at my company. I thought that my life, which had stopped in time, was finally moving again, and I was happy. But of course, my wife had to ruin that as well. A little less than 4 years after she disappeared, I saw my wife standing at my door with a baby in her arms. Girlfriend laughed when I proposed to her, so I laughed as I made her homeless. My girlfriend Rachel and I started dating when we met in high school. She was a sweet girl, but she had a lot of problems at home. Her mother had died when she was 10 and she never knew her father. She was unhappy, so my family offered to let her live with us. She and I lived together in our finished basement. Now, me and Rachel have been together for 7 years, and I knew that it was finally time to propose. I was working in a grocery store. They had just promoted me to manager. I knew that Rachel liked the finer things in life and I worked really hard to keep her happy, so I saved my money. But whenever I could, I would spend it to take her to nice restaurants and buy her things she liked. I didn't have much money for a ring, but I bought the best thing I could find. I figured I would get her a nicer one when we had more money. I was sure she would understand. I dressed in my best suit. I took her out to a fancy restaurant that she had wanted to go to for a long time. A few minutes after we were seated, I told Rachel to order whatever she wanted, no matter how expensive it is. When it was the perfect time, I got down on one knee, looked at her in the eyes, and asked her to marry me. When I busted out with the ring, Rachel started laughing. I was so excited. She was laughing and was so happy because I finally proposed to her after 7 years. But she just kept laughing and laughing. Tears were coming out of her eyes. I asked her why she was laughing, but she couldn't answer me because she was laughing so hard. Now I was a bit confused, but I went on with it. She saw that I was looking at her wondering what was going on. She finally calmed down enough to tell me what was so funny. She said the diamond is so tiny, and it is impossible to see it without a microscope. Then she looked at me and said that she would never marry a man that would disrespect her like that. She called me broke and a lazy grocery store employee. Then she started laughing even harder. To make things worse, everyone in the restaurant was looking at us and laughing too. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I knew Rachel had expensive taste, but I thought she loved me. I walked out of the restaurant. I had never been more humiliated in my life. I went in my car and left without Rachel. When I got home, the first thing I did was take Rachel's things and throw them out the window. I didn't want to have anything to do with her. When she got back, she asked me what was going on.
A customer milked in my throat after my shift. For some context, I work in retail, specifically a very female-targeted store. We do have a men's collection, but it's very minimal. So being a naughty girl, I'm usually left dry to the amount of male customers. So the store is coming closer to closing. And I'm finishing up with all my clients as I see a man in the men's section. I go up to him and immediately, from the way he looks me head to toe, I can tell he's attracted to me. I want this guy to use me. So as we do, we flirt looking at products, mostly on the belts, as he puts it around his waist to size. I know he encouraging me to look at his hot dog. I would have gripped it right then and there if my coworkers weren't watching. After flirting, I bring his items to the register as we joke and ring him up. When he pays, he puts in card in too early, and I make a comment about him going too early, and he gets it. Walking out, he asks for my number, and asks to go for drinks later, and he sees my confusion. I usually get mistaken for older, when I'm actually only 19. Well, after my shift, I let him drive my car. I ended up finding out he was 35. I was so corny that I couldn't contain myself on the way, so I started eating his hot dog. Gladly, my window tint is dark, however the strip is insanely bright, and we were in traffic, so anyone who looked through the windshield would be able to see what we were doing. After him releasing his load in my mouth, we finally arrived at his place. With saliva and milk dripping from my mouth onto my work dress, I went home. What a day. I would definitely want to do this again, but with more men at the same time.
What was the worst thing your ex-girlfriend asked of you that eventually blew up in her face? My ex-girlfriend and I are both 23 years old. We had been together for 4 years at this point. We had a pretty good relationship, or so I thought. I'm in college and working part-time, so I paid the bills. We did not live together. I'm a very romantic guy. So every time we were together, I was all over her, kissing and hugging her. That's my love language. She used to be just like that also. Then, suddenly, she started pulling away from me. She stopped initiating. I somehow knew what was coming my way. I started to pull away as well. I dropped simple hints that I knew something. However, I did not confront her. I didn't touch her either for that entire week. I think that did the trick because, at the end of the week, she confessed. But of course, her confession was with so much gaslighting. Weirdly, she did not shift the blame at me. She then dropped the bomb that she had been going on random dates for 2 weeks at that point. She already liked 5 of them. She said the whole "I want to explore" thing. I just agreed. But I knew that was the end of our relationship. I didn't want her to explode at that point by ending things, so I just played along. She proposed an open relationship with some rules. She said that there should be no sleeping over, no more than 1 or 2 dates with the same person, and no sleeping with friends. I agreed with everything she said. I'm kind of good looking. I'm not very handsome, but I take care of myself. That was enough to flirt with some girls in college or from work. I knew I would have a bunch of dates without dropping a sweat. She is a pretty girl, so she had her share too. But, when I was at her place and had a date that night, she would just stare at me while I dressed up. I knew she was jealous, but I just couldn't give a damn. We barely had intimacy. The affection I gave her before did not exist anymore. She's grown a little depressed over the course of 3 weeks. One night, she asked to make the relationship exclusive again. I couldn't hold it in. I blasted out laughing. I told her no. It was over when she said she wanted an open relationship. I didn't give a damn about our relationship anymore. I just ended things right there, and then I went out for my date. After a couple of days, she blew up my phone, asking for forgiveness. She wanted to get back together. I didn't respond. 2 months have passed, and it's now Christmas here. Her family just passed by and greeted me. They were thanking me for being a good son-in-law for them in the last year. They apologized for their daughter's behavior. That caught me off guard. I didn't think that my ex-girlfriend would tell them the truth about the nature of our breakup, especially because they hadn't contacted me in any way over those 2 months that had passed. My ex-girlfriend and I maintained a little bit of contact, but not the normal one. She was stalking me on my social media accounts. She would leave creepy responses using different profiles. Every time I blocked one, she would create another one. How did I know it was her? She told me while chasing me. She camped outside my house on a weekend day, waiting for me to come out. She ambushed me into talking to her again. When I opened my garage to start working on my bike, she just jumped right in and tried hugging me. It's pretty pathetic. I started running around my house with her, trying to catch me. I was able to call the police and hide inside my house. She kicked my bike down and screwed it up a little bit. Soon, the cops arrived and got her arrested. She resisted, which worsened her situation. I testified, and they let me go. She got admitted to a mental facility for some issues she already had. She hasn't been treated correctly, mostly because of the psychotic breakdown she was having at the moment. I don't really know how she got that obsessed with me. We hadn't talked since I blocked her. I now have a restraining order. I hope to never see her again in my life. Women, what was your nice guy's finish last moment? There was a guy I had a crush on in high school, from the time we were freshmen. He was absolutely infatuated with a girl who was a senior. She had absolutely zero interest in him, being 4 years older and all, but still he pined for her. And I pined for him, doing my best to become his friend in the meantime. Over the next 4 years he did everything to get her to notice him, even joining all of the same clubs and extracurriculars she was in. By the end of our sophomore year I was done waiting for this to subside, and started to talk to and date other guys, though I still remained his best friend. We had become close and I really did care about him. Sadly, this was mostly listening to him complain about how she never noticed him. He was perpetually depressed. I still sort of hoped that one day he would just stop focusing on her for a moment and look at me. When we graduated high school he obviously went to the same college she had chosen and picked the same major, even though she was almost done there. I picked a different college because I was done listening to him pine for her at this point, and had a steady boyfriend anyway. After college I reconnected with him on Facebook. I saw no sign of Caroline on his page or friends list, and being hopeful, asked him if he'd like to get dinner. He said yes and I went to pick him up. I had taken a really long time to get ready, get my nails done, have my makeup done, and I was planning on asking him if he wanted to start a relationship that night. About halfway through the dinner he said, "I'm actually really glad you called, I've been feeling really down lately. Caroline just got engaged and asked me to be a groomsman in her wedding." I listened like the good friend I was. I politely finished dinner. I finally gave up, and I have never talked to him again.